when I met my wife, Crystal, which was about 15 years ago, she used to say things like, "Oh, you'd be great in public office." And I'm like, absolutely not.
So she was the one saying it.
Yeah, she used to say that to me, and it just wasn't something that I personally thought I would be good at. When I had a friend of mine come and ask me, "Hey, the seat for District 21 is going to be open. Would you consider running?" And I was like, "No, absolutely." And so
hard pass.
Yeah, hard pass on that one. And but she said the most dangerous words that ever get said was, "Well, would you just consider praying about it?" Right? And I was like, "Sure, yeah, I'll pray about it."
Yeah. Please go away.
Yeah, please go away. And so it was kind of through that though of actually taking time to actually bring it before the Lord and praying about it. That as I was praying about it, I was like, "Oh crud! I think I might actually be called. I might be called to do this."
Hey, everybody. Thank you once again for joining us for the Jacob Sheriff Podcast. We're really excited about this episode. We get to interview one of our friends, Cody Maynard, who is now the official next Oklahoma State representative for District 21. And part of your story of how that came to be is the primary reason we wanted to invite you on this episode. Just before we get into that, we would love it if you take a minute to like, comment, subscribe, share, and if you find anything in this podcast helpful, just let us know. We want to hear from you. Before we get straight into the interview, if you haven't already, we've done 2 episodes this season, and I feel like this story is going to kind of flow right out of those. So if you've missed those 2 episodes for this season so far, go back and listen to those. We did one on the challenge of change, and then one on endurance. And now we're going to get to brass tacks of how that actually plays out in real life. So,
and not just in our lives, in the lives of someone, a family who has done really hard things and has made a lot of changes and had to endure a lot of things in a very unique scenario that most of us aren't ever going to feel. So this is how these principles act in real time in someone's life, doing what the Lord's called them to do. Yeah.
So Cody, if you could just kind of give everybody a little bit of background. Who are you? Why should we care what you have to say? No, just let us know kind of.
He's had to do that for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
He's like, I know how to talk about myself now. It's part of it.
Well, I'm Cody Maynard. I'm a CPA. So my background, I've been actually employed at Victory Life Church for 12 years, and accounting is kind of my natural default skill set. So I'm very introverted. So a lot of this was very outside my wheelhouse. Knowing that I was going to run for office meant I had to talk to a lot of people, do things like this, interviews, be in front of crowds. And I'll just tell you, those are those moments when sometimes the Lord asks things of you that your first answer is no, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. And Jacob got to sit with me through some of this because I did come to him after. I was like, "Jacob, I think I'm supposed to run for office." And those were kind of sobering words to have to say out loud to somebody because for those of you who don't know me, this was not something that was ever in my 5-year plan or 10-year,
career path at all.
You're right. Those are those things of, when I met my wife, Crystal, which was about 15 years ago, she used to say things like, "Oh, you'd be great in public office." And I'm like, absolutely not.
So she was the one saying it.
Yeah, she used to say that to me, and it just wasn't something that I personally thought I would be good at. And so, you can discount a lot of those things. And so when I had a friend of mine come and ask me, "Hey, the seat for District 21 is going to be open. The current person in there, their term's over. Would you consider running?" And I was like, "No, absolutely." And so
hard pass.
Yeah, hard pass on that one. And but she said the most dangerous words that ever get said was, "Well, would you just consider praying about it?" Right? And I was like, "Sure, yeah, I'll pray about it."
Yeah. Please go away.
Yeah, please go away. And so it was kind of through that though of actually taking time to actually bring it before the Lord and praying about it. That as I was praying about it, I was like, "Oh crud! I think I might actually be called. I might be called to do this." And so that's kind of how I got into this. And I will, a phrase I gave to Crystal, my wife, way back then, is I would just say, because I'll tell you this, I knew conversations in town about other people being asked and considered to run for the seat. I'm like, that person would be great. Yes, choose that person. So I joked with her and with some of my friends, some of you guys, to saying that I know I wasn't God's first choice, but I will be his last because I will say yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's just kind of always been our commitment as a family, is that we're going to do what God asked us to do, and we're not going to make our decisions based upon finances or based upon what makes us comfortable. It's that thing of, if God says yes, and if we do, we seek counsel and wisdom to determine, is this a real yes? But if he says yes, we're in. And that's where I kind of came to Jacob going, please say no to this. Submit this to counsel and to friends and to wisdom. But it was those things, knowing, honestly, like, this was a long shot, right? This was not, I was not probably the person on anyone's list to think this person's going to make it through to office. And those are those things that I'd have people at church come up to me like, hey, I'm praying for you. I have the word David and Goliath over you, right? And I'm like, oh, great. I know what the challenge before me was, and I'll tell you, that race for me was close. 68 votes was my certified count for a win. Like, that was a close one, but a win's a win. But just through those processes, there's a lot of putting feet to your faith. And this is where a lot of the stuff you've talked about, running your race with endurance, things are easy to start out in the beginning. It's all exciting, but it's really when you have to go knock a couple thousand doors that you start questioning what you're doing. And so it really, what I really came down to, some of the biggest challenges, and I'll give you a chance to ask me questions. And us politicians, we talk.
You just keep going.
We'll keep
That's
going.
so funny. Now you're saying us politicians.
I know. I don't even like the term legislator.
There you go.
Legislate. I don't like politician.
Yes.
But just some of the things that kind of learning through this process was, there's a moment of prayer and consideration, but then there's a moment where you have to put action to your faith. Faith without works is dead, right? And so to believe you're called to something, but not to take all the corresponding steps to walk it out, it's useless. Like, I could be called all day long, but I have to actually answer the call and then put feet to my faith. And so with that, I'll stop talking for a second and let y'all ask some questions. But.
Well, I think this is like the perfect story to follow up the last couple episodes that we recorded, because so much of what you're talking about is that process that we all go through in trying to respond in obedience to God, whatever it is he's called us to do. And if we're to grow and not remain in our comfort zones and remain, we're at the place where you say, our life actually gets smaller when we remain in our comfort zone. The only way to grow, or what do you say, 100%?
100% of your growth is outside your comfort zone.
Outside your comfort zone. You have to actually leave Ur of the Chaldees. You actually have to leave your comfort zone and take a step out into that. So what was your first step outside of your comfort zone in this process?
My first one, honestly, I called a group of my close friends together and just said, hey, I want all of you to come to my house, because Crystal and I feel like I'm led to do this, and I don't want to do it without talking to you guys first. And so that was step one, telling about 30 people, going, I think I'm going to run for office, and I want you all to be here. Pray for, and it was great. They prayed for me, gave me words that were needed, needed in those moments. And that was actually my real launch, right? It was actually, that was my launch point, was with a close group of family and friends that could really pray over me and my family. So that was kind of the starting out. And then after that, I went to a training, just kind of like, how do you be a legislator? What things do I need to know? Which, that was terrifying. You go to that stuff and you're like, I'm that person, I would get a syllabus in like college or school and like, I can't do all of this. This is way too much. But you just got to start, right? You start somewhere and take steps. And so kind of started there. And I just remember, when we're talking about being in your comfort zone or out of your comfort zone, I was driving in my car still in this season where I was praying this through, like, well, I still have a chance to back out, right? Like this isn't final.
Right. I've told my friends, but I can also tell them, nope, God said
right.
no. Yeah.
Right. Like I'm not public yet.
Right.
Like I can back out of this. So I was driving in my car and I was just talking to God, and I was like, I really want to know you more. And I don't know I'd ever say it. I never hear like the audible voice of God, but I just had this thought hit me, those moments like I know this is the Holy Spirit. And it just said, all of me that you're going to know inside your comfort zone. But if you want to find more of me, you're only going to find me out there. And so it was that moment where I was like,
Ouch.
yeah. And so it's just that challenge from God of like, if you want to find me, you're going to have to come out here.
Wow.
And so it's just those moments where
Was Oceans playing in the?
no, but it would have been appropriate. And it really, yeah.
On the waters.
And I will say though, through the process, and this is where you have to balance everything out with wisdom. And we don't have time to probably do all that here today, but I want people to know that, I've walked out my life with the Lord. This was not just a moment where I just went out on a whim.
Yeah.
I've spent my lifetime studying His Word, listening to sermons, praying, learning to hear His voice. And so those are those moments where I know I heard Him. And so being certain in those things of every time in this whole process, I've stepped out my comfort zone, and I haven't been in my comfort zone for, it feels like a year and a half now.
Well, it was so, the runoff election. So you had the primary election, which was in June of 2022. And if you don't get 50% of the votes, which there were 4 candidates, you have to go to a runoff with the top 2. And that was in August 2022. So it was, I want to say it was spring 2021 when we were having a conversation.
Yes.
So, it is a year and a half of like from the early signs of you praying this through to now is over a year and a half. And I dare say you haven't been in your comfort zone more or less at all.
No. But I will say on the plus side, when I listen to you in sermons, I don't feel like I have to dodge because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
There you go.
Amen. And I'm there.
Sometimes you're in church like, oh, I really should be doing that. Other times I'm like, I'm there. No problem.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's good.
Check.
Yeah. But the crazy thing, as you take those faith steps, some of the other verses that were critical to me is, I believe it's 2 Corinthians, I think 12, verse 9, where God's talking to Paul, my faith is sufficient for you. Go in, like, your own weakness is where I'm made strong. And I can just tell you, I've had so many moments going like, Lord, I don't actually have the natural capability to do these things, to do what's asked of me. And His grace in those, and I can't explain it. Like, there's moments I am nervous almost every time before I've gotten on a stage, before I've had to do debates. But then when I get up there, like even God's never late, but He will wait till the last moment.
It's like Gandalf.
He's Gandalf. He arrives precisely when he means to.
I was going to resist the quote, but
no,
don't resist.
We've cultivated at least enough listeners to get moderately familiar with some.
Oh, well, great. Well, then I'll give a good Frodo quote with
there
it.
You go.
That I said to my wife the other day, where I was like, why did this ring have to come to me? would that it could go to any other? But in those moments, like you feel your heart rate go up. Those moments where anxiety's hot, you're like, oh my, you're nervous, and like literally step up and grab the mic, and that stuff stops, and a coherent sentence comes out. You listen later, and you're like, thank you, Lord, that made sense. But even in
every Sunday.
But you still can't mistake. There's the natural reaction your body has. But even for I spent hours literally sitting in my sunroom to rehearse a 5-minute speech, right? And so it's like I've learned there's still preparation I have to do. I can't just wing it, but I've learned there's still my own weakness, right? Like I'm still nervous, and when you get nervous, that stuff can leave in an instant, right?
Absolutely.
You can have that moment where you're going, I have no clue what I'm about to say. But what I've found to be amazing is God's grace is sufficient to partner with you, of going, like in the moment, those things come back. And, I've had Him calm me down where I can speak coherently. And so even in fundraising, my goodness, asking people for money, not my thing. And
you can account for it extremely well.
Absolutely. I'll tell
asking
you
for
where
it is,
every penny went, but asking for it's a whole other thing. And so, just to see, to watch his faithfulness. So, I mean, through this political campaign, I had probably close to $140,000 spent against me. People running groups funding them. I personally had probably about 50 to 60,000 that I had available. So like we're over the double mark, right? The money being spent against me, just stuff going like this. I'm not a known person. I don't have all the finances and funding that are backing other people. So it's like, I know if I'm going to win this, like, yes, I have to do my part. And those are those things of like, just because God calls me, I know it doesn't guarantee anything. His purposes, I've got to go pray over people at their doors. Some of my favorite encounters is, and I don't want to name names, but I got to meet a lady who she had lost her husband during COVID. She was going through cancer treatment, and I knocked her door because, just doing the political thing, go knock doors and tell people who you are, and just have that moment where I was like, I need to pray for her. So I was like, can I pray for you? Because she's still behind her screen door. I know she's got, cancer, and she's going through chemotherapy, and I know, I want to be sensitive to that. But I was like, can I pray for you? So she stepped out. She came out her door. I put my hand on her, prayed for her. And at the end, she goes, where do you go to church? And I said, Victory Life Church. And she said, that's my church. She said, I haven't been able to go in 3 years. And I got to see her back at church about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's really, those are those moments of like, I had some of those times where I'm like, even if I didn't win, there's still been some great moments that I got to connect with people. And so I never presumed to understand all of God's purposes. All I know to do is to run and do the last thing he told me, right? Like he told me to run. And so, I've knocked thousands of doors, and I did it when it was 112 degrees. And those are those things that what I want to encourage people to is in running your race with endurance is that did I feel like it? No. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was like, I'm tired. Like, I don't want to go out today. I've worked my regular day job this week. I've knocked doors every night. I've knocked doors all day Saturday. It's Sunday, and I'm going to go back out today, and I don't want to. And those are those, I had multiple moments where I'm like, will this actually matter? Is this going to actually sway the vote? Well, there was 68 vote difference, so I'm guessing
absolutely it mattered.
But those are those moments where I know I will do what I can do in the natural, and I have to believe God to do what he can do in the supernatural. And you can't, I don't know how to say this nicely, you can't just sit back and pray. You do need to pray, but you have to add into that corresponding action. And that's where, I want to put a little prod out to the church of, I've heard a lot of words go out about a third grade awakening. What's important to me is what I have learned. If you look at like the story of Moses, God had a word for them of your promised land. He had to wait for a generation that was willing to carry the word. And so my challenge is, will we be the generation that's going to carry the word? And so for me to get called out, you've heard the 7 mountains of culture. So like politics is one the church doesn't usually want to touch.
Right.
And so we're not going to see a third grade awakening unless the church invades every area of our culture. We have to take those things back over and be the church. We have to be light in the darkness. So I think that's kind of if I get one chance to kind of prod the church a little bit right now, is that you need to put action to your faith. Whatever you're praying for, if you're not doing something to help see that prayer come to fruition, I want to challenge you to go do something. So I don't know. I'll throw that out there, Jacob. You can pastor that later.
That's what I think was encouraging about this whole thing. Again, you and Crystal's awareness that like God's calling you was not a guarantee.
Right.
And you do operate in the prophetic, and there's things that you sense confirming inside of you that you can see some things that is in the future, but none of that is guaranteed.
Right.
There was no guarantee. And in this case, even speaking about endurance, I mean, you guys worked your tail ends off to get to the primary election, which is in late June. And the hope was not victory; it was to get 50%
Right.
plus, because then it's over.
Right.
And then the sacrifices that you guys have made as a family, you can enjoy a summer. And we were at that watch party, and it's looking like you're winning. But can we get to that? And it was 42%,
41, yeah.
41%. And it's like you won, but with 41%.
Right.
And so there's like what you thought was a finish line was like a lap.
Oh yeah. I'll tell you, we had one of our staff huddles where we all meet together. And so one of my coworkers, she came up to me, she's like, I have a word for you. It was before the primary round 1 in June. So she's like, God's saying it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I was like, I rebuke you.
Yeah.
No,
Get thee behind me, Satan.
absolutely. I'm like, she means the whole journey is a marathon.
Yeah,
Right?
not this particular one.
And I definitely had those moments of like I'm believing for an outright win, and I'm pushing hard for it, and you didn't get it, and I had to walk through disappointment.
Yeah.
Like I had a good probably 2 to 3 weeks where, man, my spirits were down, and I still had to go knock doors. Those moments of like
Vote for me,
Yeah.
please.
but that's where I will tell you though, like still where the grace of the Lord showed up is when I knocked the first door. Not before then,
Yeah.
not when I'm driving
Not
up
on
my
the drive.
driveway. Like, you drive your 20 minutes to the neighborhood and you knock the first door and grace shows up. And, 4 and 5 hours later, you're like, oh, wow, okay, I'm done for the day. And so, when sometimes it's 9 hours later, but those are still those things of even when I was burnt out in those moments, that God's grace still showed up for me if I would take the steps.
Yeah.
If I stayed home, I would feel burnt out the whole day. And so it's like if I'd go out and knock doors, while I'm knocking doors, His grace is sufficient. And I still had to walk through just the process of some disappointment. And in that, one of those things that I know that God, He pushes us through everything for multiple purposes. And I knew when I was running the race, I was like, He's developing in me things that I will need when I'm in office. And so when I was approaching that June election, I was like, I had a sense, I was like, I'm not going to win this outright because I think He needs to finish developing some other things. And I was like, those are those things like, I'm not going to even say it out loud because I don't want to prophesy against myself.
Yeah, you're not even going to give Satan fodder.
Right, yeah.
It's like if I just keep it in my head, then even the devil doesn't know. He doesn't know what's in my head. He only knows what I say out
That's
loud.
right. Yeah. So that was my hope. I'm like, if I just don't say it, it won't be true. But I'll still challenge everybody, just those little words that God gives throughout the way.
Yeah.
Some of the verses that were really essential to me was in Judges, just the story of Gideon, right? So if you kind of read through Judges chapter 6, Gideon's he meets the Lord on the threshing floor, all these things, and he's like, I'm not equipped for what you're calling me to. I'm the least of my family, least of my tribe. And God totally just ignores it, right? And He just calls him a mighty man of valor. Like God didn't even give place to His own thoughts that Gideon's having. But the verse that was so critical to me that I said over and over to myself throughout the whole process was, God said, go with the strength that you have. So like the second time Gideon comes back, that's God's response is, go with the strength you currently have. And so that's where I've partnered that a lot with 2 Corinthians of, in my weakness, He's made strong. With whatever strength you have, though it may be weak, if you will go with the strength and go to what God's called you to, that's where His grace is made strong in you, and His sufficiency will show up. And so I can't tell you how many times I would be in my car driving. I'm like, go with the strength that you have. Go with the strength that you have.
How did you walk through that with your family or with your kids? That first primary election, I'm sure your kids were all behind all of this. So what did that look like?
Yeah. Well, the kids, they have much shorter time horizons than adults do. So for them, I've been running for 10 years.
Okay,
the longest thing ever. And I'm like,
Their whole life.
Yeah, my whole life, right? And so it was hard for them. They were disappointed because now Dad's got to keep going out and knocking doors. So that's kind of what they see. And those were hard moments. Definitely had a few moments where one of my children have to put them to bed where they're crying because they miss time with you. And I'm like, hey, it's just like, give me 2 more weeks, and it's like, that's forever, And so even just pushing endurance in them. But what me and my wife have just tried to reiterate and show them over and over is that we're going to serve, like, and it's not always going to be easy, but these are seasons, right? Like there's going to be moments where we have to do really hard work, and it's going to be busy and it's going to be full. But God He will reward us for all those things. Nothing. He's like, there's nothing you're going to miss. You're not going to miss out on anything. And I really want my kids to learn the value of just following the Lord. And we've walked them through the process. Like, I don't know the outcome, of just kind of come door knock with me today. They each did it about once, and they discovered it wasn't that fun. But, I think just through those processes with my kids, I really want to show them what it looks like to follow the Lord as best you know how. And so, I think what was really, really amazing is watching my own kids constantly pray that I would win, even though sometimes they don't want me to. Like, I mean, my oldest, we had conversations what this is going to mean. Dad's going to be up in Oklahoma City for a few months out of the year. And, what do you think about that? And he's kind of processing those thoughts, and he's like, he said, I don't want you to go. He said, but if God calls you to it, you have to do it, Dad. That was his response, like, you have to go. And so those are really important things to just kind of watch those moments with your kids where they process that, and they have those moments of, I don't want you to go, but then I know you have to go do this. And so it's been a hard process on some of that, but I think that it's going to be really good for them overall. Like, they're going to get to grow up with a different experience of meeting people they never would have met. They're going to see things from politics to church to business to all sorts of things. And I'm just excited for whatever doors God has for them in the future too. Because for me, a lot of this really came down to I'm having to make a sacrifice in the short term for them and for some family time there. But I truly believe if we, even as the whole church, don't make some sacrifices right now, the sacrifices that they're going to have to make are going to be multiplied. And so it's those things of, it's just like working out. If you work out when you're young and stay healthy, you have a longer life. If you wait until the end and try to delay, working out's more painful. Your body doesn't respond as well, and it doesn't have the same effect. And so that to me is like, I know that in the past we've had generations that have had to make great sacrifices for us, and we've got to live pretty easy because of it. But if we don't start making some sacrifices now, the price that our kids and grandkids are going to have to pay, and that makes it worth making sometimes that painful sacrifice right now is going, I don't want them to pay the price that will come if we don't get our nation back on track and get people back into a moral state of being. You've said it, Jacob, that we're entering basically into a post-Christian society, and the effects of that are, if you roll it down 40 years, it's going to get worse if we don't recover that. So that kind of stuff, you have to remind yourself you can't think short term. It's just like a business investment. You can't count the cost of what it's going to cost you next year. You have to go, what's my outcome in 20 years? And is that worth the initial sacrifice?
We, in the last episode, we talked about how important it is when you're trying to walk or run with endurance to have a clear picture, a clear vision of what it is you're actually running toward and what you're aiming at. And then, the Bible even says that it was for the joy that was set before him that Christ endured the cross, despising the shame. And for you, what was that vision, that clear picture? Maybe it's just I won, or what is it that you kept in the forefront of your mind?
A tether, or like an anchor.
To keep pulling you forward even when it was tough.
Well, I don't know if I have a real clear answer on it. Some of it came down to I'm just that person that I don't like to leave anything unfinished. So if you know me, like, I'll read a book to the end, even if I don't like it, because I started it. And God knows that about me. So he front loads me with words, and then sometimes he gets quiet in the middle to see, like, will you keep going? So a lot of times that tether has actually been my own character that that's a gift he gave me too. But it's just that thing of the way I am wired is I do not like to quit something I have started. And so it's just those things of, like, when I don't want to go knock doors again, when I don't want to do the next event, it's like you committed to it. And once you say yes, I mean, some of that I think comes down to just maybe I was taught those things of like a man honors his word, you know, to his own hurt, you know, so even if you don't like the results, you said yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes those tethers are even the people that donated to me. You know, had a few moments where I'm like, I could just lose, you know, like that wouldn't be such a bad outcome, right? But then it's like that would be a dishonor to all the people that sowed financially into me, that volunteered coming out and knocking doors with me. And so sometimes even just an honor for other people has been a tether, where my love for others and the sacrifices they have made has kept me tethered to the goal. In addition to just that my own heart's cry to see this nation return back to God, because I really want to see our kids have something better than what we've got. And that's been a tether of like those moments of going, if you don't push through, you don't get to complain later when you don't like the results you have. Right. And so it's just been those things of like, not that I ever want to complain, but it's just those things of like, you need to do everything you can. And that's not always enough to keep you wanting to go. Sometimes you're just tired, right? Like I need to sleep. I'm just downright tired right now. And so I don't know if that helps, but I mean, some of it's been you have to develop character within yourself. There's not enough people today that sometimes just have those character traits that I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to quit. And those are things that, again, even through the process, yes, with my kids, like I've told them, they're like, I don't want to go door knocking. I'm like, I don't either. So, but I'm going, and like, you're going to come with me today. Because just want to show them character of like, you don't have to want to do things all the time.
Your feelings don't always align with what you should do.
Oh my goodness. There's no quicker way to get off track than to listen to your feelings.
There you go.
And it's great while your feelings are all on the high and you're excited and it's all good, but sometimes your feelings aren't there and you've got to push in. And that to me is where character gets developed. And that to me is,
past the feelings.
Past the feelings, past those moments. And that's where endurance, that's where you really find endurance. Like you don't have endurance until you hit the point where you don't feel like going on anymore.
It's good.
Then you're in endurance at that point, and you get to find out if you will endure. And I'm going to give you a half-formed thought, so we'll see what it comes out with. You can finish it later. But one of the things that when I started this process that God started kind of talking to me about was all the verses in the Bible talking about suffering with Christ, like all the verses you like to skip over, you know, and ignore. When you read it, you're like, pick up your cross. Yes, that's great. You know, you want to skip that kind of stuff. But when you are in heaven, or heaven has come to earth, whichever happens first, there will be no more suffering. There will be no more pain. This is the only time you will have that sort of offering to give to the Lord. So, I mean, I had a moment, I was driving in my car before speaking at the church event that we were hosting with, you know, it was none of my other state rep candidates came. It was all federal Congress people, people who have done this job, most of them for years, and are fantastic speakers. So you have that moment, you're like, I don't want to be on the stage with them. They're pros. I'm new. I remember driving in my car. I mean, I was just feeling nervous, just so nervous about it. And just had that moment where I was like, this is the moment of, sometimes suffering for Christ looks different in different situations. And so I just turned it around and I was like, Lord, every moment of me feeling anxious or scared of this, I give to you as an offering. Like, let every moment of discomfort I have be an offering to you, because I won't let it stop me. As like, in the harder Satan pushes in to make me feel scared, I'm going to offer that back to you as my service to you. And like, you'll never get that chance again. Like, once you pass on or Christ comes back, you won't get a chance to offer him that kind of a sacrifice, because you won't experience it anymore. So, half-formed thought. I don't have the full theology around that, but
I'll develop it. Have a series, maybe write a book.
That's good.
That's good.
So I do have to, I mean, we're talking about sacrifices. We're talking about pain and suffering. So I have to share a story about volunteering with your campaign. I don't think you've heard this story yet, so this will be
sacrificial.
This will be there's blood involved. So I bled for your campaign, Cody, and I don't know if you have heard this yet or not.
I have not.
This is awesome.
So anyway, this is
And painful.
after you've won, and I'm so excited. I'm happy to see. Hey, Cody pulled it off. He won the victory, but there's some cleanup that has to happen. These campaign signs got to be taken down. Well, this is after Jubilee. This is recently. This is less than a week ago. Actually, this happened. So I haven't been feeling that great all through Jubilee, and then even after, I took some time, and I helped you film some campaign videos, and I was like coughing the whole time, and it was awful. But the first day that I started feeling like mostly normal, I was like, oh man, I'm going to get outside. I'm going to do some work. I'm going to help Cody take down these campaign signs. So I posted in the little Facebook volunteer group, yeah, I'll get my truck and I'll go around and pick these things up. So I have a big Vote for Cody Maynard sign in my front yard. I'm all excited. I go out there, and I didn't get very far because as I was cutting through the zip ties, I went to the right where the T-post is, and I'm going to blame it on being medicated. I get my pocket knife, and instead of doing the proper safety technique of making sure that your body is clear from the path of the blade, I go to cut through this zip tie, not anticipating how easily my very sharp knife is going to go through it. And it goes straight through and right into the top of my leg. No. It goes in about, maybe for the cameras, maybe about that deep. And yeah, I've shed blood for you, my friend. So anyway, obviously this was a total idiot move on my part. I do not hold the Vote for Cody campaign liable in any way. But anyway, so the rest of the story is cuts like that. For whatever reason, I've kind of always been this way. I get lightheaded and I see it, and then all of a sudden, my spirit tries to leave my body, and I'm like, oh no, I'm going to pass out. So anyway, I run inside. I'm trying not to look directly at it because I know it's bad. I can feel the blood sticking to my pants, and it's like, it's a pretty deep cut. And so anyway, I get inside. My girls are at school, thank goodness, but Audrey's at home, and she's cleaning the other bathroom, and she's got the water running in there, so she can't hear me. I'm like, Audrey, I need your help. I'm not panicking, but I'm like, help, I need your help. And so I go into the other bathroom, and I've got my leg in the tub, so I can take a look at what's going on. And there's a pretty good chunk of meat missing from my leg. And I'm like, oh boy, this isn't good. And so Audrey comes in there. She's got a wet paper towel, and she's I'm like, all right, well, just give it to me. I stopped I put it on the wound to stop the bleeding. I'm maybe exaggerating a little bit for a dramatic effect, but it doesn't hurt really at all. Well,
because you have no feeling.
Still have no feeling.
Messed up the nerve endings.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm in there, but then I start to feel like my heart rate starts to come down. The adrenaline spike is wearing off, and I'm getting dizzy. Like, oh boy, this ain't good. I'm going to pass out. And she's like, don't you pass out. I won't be able to carry you to the car. I'm like, is that a fat joke? Anyway, so I'm like, I can feel myself. I'm like, I know when my body's reacting this way. It's like, I got to get on the ground. I got to equalize everything. So I get out of the tub, and I just lay back on the floor. And I'm like sitting there watching the wall. And everything starts to sort of like fade and is getting closed in. And it's all because I looked at the stupid wound. If I hadn't done that, it would have been fine. But anyway, everything's getting fuzzy. And then the sound starts to distort. And everything's like, like I can literally feel my hearing fading away. And Audrey calls Tom Mosley to the rescue. Tom and Jeremy both actually came. And I didn't end up passing out. I was able to equalize everything and regain consciousness. Tom got me patched up. I'm fine. But that is a pretty awesome story. That's awesome.
That also explains why that sign was only hanging by a few threads.
Yeah.
So
I didn't get very far.
I came to take that down later. I was like, how did this thing survive? Like, it's barely hanging on.
I didn't get very far. My intent was to go and like take down a bunch of them that day. and I had to post in the volunteer group
half of
later.
one.
I didn't get very far. I didn't even get a full sign down. So, you know,
Wow.
I judge myself by my intentions, and these are noble. My behavior, not so much. So what I've told my girls is they can tell everybody that their dad got stabbed. They just can't say who did it. Because it takes away the mystery.
That's right.
So anyway, what does that have to do with endurance and pain? Just don't stab yourself and you'll be fine.
I'm in light of that, without implicating any of your constituents, do you have a funny story of this campaign journey?
Oh, man.
And can you top that one? No,
Well, you know, I've knocked a lot of doors, and you get to meet people from all different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. Definitely have knocked the door. You know, guy comes to the door in a pink towel, right? Mm-hmm. Like, they're okay. Some people are just okay not being clothed when they talk to you. He had a whole conversation with me. It was great. But there's those moments you're like,
This is really happening.
This is really happening.
Yeah.
I've had a person answer the door in their underwear. Like, we're talking about briefs, you know, a guy just in his
whitey
brief,
tidies.
and had a conversation with me, you know. So there are those moments you're like, just look at their eyes. Just, you know, just hold that eye contact. So,
Wow.
yeah, I had a few
Were
of
your
those.
kids with you on either of those?
Nope, luckily not on either one of those. I did walk away. I'm like, I'm so glad my kids were not here
Yeah.
for that one. I think I've got to learn more about dogs than about people. You know, you get to study which dogs are actually going to try to kill you and which ones aren't. You got to beware of the small ones. I'm telling you, the tiny dogs, they're the
Get you.
dangerous ones.
Did you just start carrying like hot dogs with you and just
go.
like chop them up every time
That
you see
would
a
have been a
dog?
really
Just
good
start throwing
idea.
'em. You'll get their vote
I didn't actually
if
do
dogs
that.
could vote.
But I definitely was knocking on the door, and I guess these people had one of those perimeter fences that like the little wire in the ground, right? Because usually I walk up, if there's a fence, you look for a dog. So it's just the front yard of a house. I go up there, I'm knocking the door, and I kind of hear this little clicking of nails behind you on the concrete. So I turn around, and we've got a decent sized French bulldog behind me, and I'm like, okay, you know, I'm
calm.
inside the little doorway, so it's like there's nowhere I can go from here. So I'm like sitting there, like we're having the stare down. Like, okay, you friendly? So it kind of gives me the look, starts to walk off. I'm like, okay, I'm good. Nobody answered the door. I'm gonna go back to my car. I turn, take 2 steps. It gives me the look, right? Of like, oh, now you're moving, right? So, I mean, it starts growling at me and comes back, and like, I've got this moment. I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna have to like wrestle this animal or something.
gosh.
Like, I don't know what's gonna happen.
And hopefully not lose a vote in the process.
Yeah, don't lose a vote. I hope this isn't on a Ring doorbell somewhere. And luckily, like this little tiny Chihuahua comes up, right? I'm like, gosh, I got a second dog, you know, because they got the little shock collar on.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just got to find it where their perimeter is.
Yeah, run fast.
But the little one, you know, it's barking. It comes running up to me, and it's friendly, right? So I start petting at the other dogs. Like, oh, cool, we're good. So, yeah, it just walks off. I was like, praise God. I was like, I had that moment, like, I'm gonna have to like stab a dog or something, like get a pocket knife and fight a dog to the ground.
Yeah, they're strangely effective. I know from first-hand experience. I fought myself off really good. I didn't get any work done.
But yeah, no, I didn't have not too many of those. I mean, I had a few close calls, but overall, you're good. Most dogs won't try to actually kill you.
Yeah. How many? Did you have anybody or how many people or any stories of someone outright antagonistic? Because I know when it comes to door knocking, I would say, I mean, because the districts in Oklahoma are 32,000 people, roughly 32,000 people. So there's 32,000 people in the district. And then, you know, we're in southern Oklahoma. I'd say majority, so more than 50% will at the worst they're going to get is I just don't want to talk to you. So just please go away. I'm going to be rude, but I don't want to talk. And I know there's a percentage that it doesn't matter what elected official, whether they're already for your opponent or they just don't care about politics or they're just having a bad day. Right. They're just going to crap you out or they're going to blame you or they're going to tell you to go away. So do you have any tellable stories of antagonism?
I have one I won't tell. I do have one. So my biggest problem throughout most of this campaign is people have not believed my age. Okay. So for the record, as of recording of this, I am 36 years old. I'm old enough to run for president. So I knocked the door, had a older lady open the door. And so I talked to her for like a minute, and she's just like, how old are you? And I'm like, I'm 36. She said, and she just looked at me. She's like, no, you're not. Don't lie to me. She just turned around and slammed her door in my face. And I was like I'm the oldest person in this race right now.
Yeah. So in the state of Oklahoma, it's just 18, right? To run for rep? I feel like representative was maybe 20 or 21.
21, 22.
Please tell me it's at least 21.
I mean,
now you're putting me on the spot.
Okay, well, it's okay. You don't have to know that level of law because you were that age. I was just trying to think.
Wow.
Because even U.S. Congress, it's not that old. It's like 20 something old.
But it's those things like people are like, they think I'm in my early 20s and they're like, you're too young. And I'm like, I'm 36. People like, just because I can't grow a beard like Josh.
Yeah, I was going to say, dude, that'd help you out. Maybe when I trim this one, I'll give you the leavings.
I should have just strapped that thing on to help me.
It's what somebody told Abraham Lincoln, right? He needed to grow whiskers.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't have the propensity
and then he got
to grow
a
beard.
stellar, like very iconic beard.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't foresee that in my future.
It's not your vision.
It's not my vision. I've tried it. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I would say one of the things that I started reflecting the night after the runoff watch party where the victory was an actual victory.
Right.
The first victory was like, yay!
You get to run again.
You get to run some more. But the actual victory, I started thinking that like, you're saying yes to the Lord, your obedience. There's this immediate effect. Okay, so the immediate tangible results that you said yes to was to run for this. So you've crossed that finish line. So now you got a 2-year cycle. And I mean, a lot of times in state reps, unless they're highly contested, once you got an incumbent, the challengers, it's not necessarily doesn't happen. It's just less likely. So, I mean, there's no easy road ahead of you, but you there. And I just started thinking, this is interesting that, because our sons are in the same class, friends, and are going to be together forever. So, my son and your son are going to grow up different than I or you would have.
Right.
Like I had friends that were like in the business world, but outside of business, there's nothing. Like I didn't have friends whose parents were educators, like superintendent level educators. So it's like all I know was like ministry and business.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, your son, your children, and your daughter, because we also have girls in the same class, are gonna, and your third is in our other daughters. I was thinking the boys, girls. Oh, then it's boy, girl. But so like all of your kids are gonna be with my kids, all growing up, and one of them is in Josh's daughter's class as well.
Yep.
Like this will not be weird to them. Because I mean, your kids might remember this process of the that was so dreadful of their dad running for office, but they will remember that my dad was a legislator,
right?
And now like my kids' friends is like in a political family, a legislative family. Yeah, they will have a certain kind of thinking and experience that I didn't have, that none of our peer groups had. And I thought, man, the implications of your obedience now affects our children in a manifold way. Not only what you do in the legislature to have impact, but just the way they think will be a completely different experience than the way any of my peer group grew up. And what kind of like the level of what they think is possible will now be expanded. Yeah. That it would not be, because I'm thinking when we were growing up, it was weird to think about being in politics.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I thought I was going to be in politics, but like I didn't have any firsthand experience. Mm-hmm. Now all of our children is going to have firsthand experience. Like all of our peer group, this community has experienced not just voting for a legislator, but actually participating in a campaign, knowing the person personally that's in the legislature. Like, that's a completely different experience. And what kind of big picture thinking will they have the capacity to dream that we're in our 30s dreaming about this and thinking about this, and you won an election, but like how that actually shifts the way a whole generation, a community in one generation is going to think. I mean, I didn't have a question attached to that, but like that's just what I started reflecting on. It's like, Israel is friend. Aslan is like the son of a legislature. In the same way, Israel's friends are going to say your dad's a pastor. And so it's like that isn't going to be weird to them. It might be weird for the next, year maybe, but after a year, it won't be weird anymore. It's just that, my dad's at the Capitol, like I just thought that was really, I won't just say interesting. Like that's kind of cool how, your decision to say yes now has so many kinds of ripple effects that isn't just the direct impact you'll have in the legislature. There's an indirect impact that I believe is positive that I think God's doing on a much grander scale. Yeah.
Well, those are those things of what I hope is that we're broadening just the impact of the church, not necessarily Victory Life Church, but the church. That, verse that always comes back to me. I know we use it for Christmas, but Isaiah chapter 9 verses 1, to us a child is born, a son is given. But right after that it says, and the government will be on his shoulders, and of the increase of his government and kingdom there will be no end. And those things I want to instill in my kids and in our church and the church is that proper government can only be had when you're connected to the Spirit of God. That is the only place that real government can be found. Our founding fathers knew that. They said similar things. You can find tons of quotes that our government was made for a moral people, and it's not made to govern an immoral people. But those are those things that I've had to meditate on my own views of politics and try to bring that back in subjection to God and go, yes, there's a counterfeit for everything. Satan can hijack anything. But what's it supposed to look like in submission to the Lord? And I want to see, hopefully, my kids and our kids and the church start to view that area back in subjection to God and to open up those doors. And so I'm going to call Danny Mackey out for just a second. So when I was right at the beginning of all this, my wife got to go have dinner with her late at like IHOP. It was real late. I like the kind of late where I wake up to my wife coming home. I'm like, how'd it go? And we were just they were talking through just kind of me feeling called to this. And Danny said one thing that was actually very critical to me in the moment. So it was just that, we were feeling called to do this, and Danny said, I don't believe it's just a test or a call for Cody, it's a test or call for the church. And that was one of those things I was like, I can get behind that. I'm like I can be the tip of the spear, but I need the rest of the group behind me.
There better be more spear behind.
That's right.
Otherwise this tip's going to break off.
That's right.
I know what that feels like. Tip didn't break, though I felt like it broke me. So
those are those moments, though, where you're just knowing that there's a call on the church. And like there might be individual calls, but not to ever lose sight of the collective of what God's trying to do in the big picture. And so that's, just talking about even the impact on kids and families of, that's great. I hope it impacts all of them. I hope all of them think of things that they wouldn't have thought possible before.
Right. I just, twice I've gotten to go be the chaplain for the state senate, and as a teenager, twice I was a page in the House and the Senate, or the House, and it always just felt so foreign. Still, even the last time, which was just earlier this year, still feels so foreign, like just not like a territory that's just unfamiliar.
Right.
And it's like, not anymore.
Yep.
It's going to be familiar territory for all the people you're connected with, and even more specifically, our kids. Our kids aren't going to feel like that's a foreigner in a foreign land when you're up in the Capitol. I mean, it's intended to intimidate you. That's what the whole design of the legislature is for, is to intimidate you.
Yep.
It's to be a sign of power. And so there's a sense where you can feel powerless. And in the spirit, I can tell you, it's heavy. It's heavy there. But like, I was just thinking, no, it's not unfamiliar anymore. It's like, oh yeah, well, like any one of our children could be like, oh, well, we know someone, so like you could run that. I think you could run for state senate or state representative. I think you could run for Congress, because we also have someone else in our church running for Congress. And it's just, I don't know, it's just an interesting time.
So absolutely. You know, I think when it comes to just being legislator or running for office, one of the things that, I don't know, it's just those things that I think God wakes you up to, like when you're up there, because you can feel there's a lot of spiritual activity going on up there.
Yeah.
If you're sensitive at all to the spirit, there's a ton of good and bad going on all over the place. And just, you know, had those moments when I was up there. It's one of those things that I also operate in the spirit of discernment frequently. And so one of those things I could just feel was the Lord was like, just remember, you're not important. Just remember, you only hold delegated authority, and they, like all the people up there, they're only interested in you as long as you hold the delegated authority. It's not actually you they're interested in. And so it's always just me remembering, like you can almost hear or feel the spirits back there that they need power. They're after that. And just to kind of always remember, I'm there to serve. And that people can't flatter you if you remember who you are. I'm just a delegated representative. Like, and not to get it in your head, because that's what they want you to think. Everybody up there wants you to think how important you are. Like once you're a state rep, or a senator, you know, governor, whatever you are, it doesn't matter. Any position you get into, everyone wants to make you feel important. And that's where I feel like the Lord just kept reminding yourself of, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. Remember who you are. And as long as you can do that, and that's what I mean, I hope there's other people out there that feel the call to go run for office. And if you do, just remember, don't think more highly of yourself than you ought, that you're a servant, and that's what you're there to do.
Well, anything else we want to interrogate this legislator about?
The good news, this isn't like a random interview. He's actually our friend. So
that's right. That's true.
We're going to be at enough.
No gotcha journalism here.
Yeah. So he'll, if his busy schedule will allow it, we can always have him back.
Awesome. Well, Cody, we just want to say thank you for taking the time to come in and share your story. I was encouraged by it, and I'm sure many of our listeners will be spurred into action to learn from your story and what you experienced. So that brings us to the end of this awesome special episode. We just want to say thank you for listening. If you want to take some time and comment, share, we would greatly appreciate that. And don't forget, if you would like to just help support this podcast, you'll find a link in the description where you can do that. Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us. That's it. We'll see you in the next one.